Hello again. We're going to sew up the lion now, very much the same as the lamb. And so for a blow-by-blow or a fuller version of sewing him up, look at the lamb on another YouTube video. But for right now, the legs are stuffed and sewn, of course. The tummy's still open, ready for more stuffing. And now we're going to do the head. So I've sewn along here with a basic running stitch, just in and out along the cast on edge, so that I can now pull it up tight and that will close. I'm going to do what I call a lock stitch to close it and keep it closed. So here's one stitch. Second stitch becomes in the same place, becomes like a keyhole. And here's the key, the needle, which is going to lock it, and that will keep it closed. Now I'm going to sew down the head here, measuring up, matching up where it's going to end. So I'm making sure that these stitches are in the right place here. I'm going to hold it carefully with one hand while I sew with the other, matching up the rows of the knittings to the extent I can. And I just like working with very fine yarn, so that's why I kind of experimented with this little lion here. Once I get to the top of the legs or the base of the chin, I'm going to put in another lock stitch so I can stuff the head. And then we'll look at it and probably close up the tummy. So here we are right here. I think I might put another stitch in just to keep these legs together a little bit. Again, taking a nibble from there and a nibble from there. Sometimes we call this the nibble stitch. Doesn't look much like a lion at the moment, but it will soon. There we go. I'm going to put a lock stitch in there to hold it firmly while we stuff it. There we go. I'm just going to let this yarn hang while I stuff it. I'm going to take a little bit of stuffing at a time and push it into the head. And I'll probably stuff it a little bit more. Looks a funny shape at the moment, but I know we can firm it up and shape it with our hands. Okay, I'm going to pause just for the 3 more times I do the same thing. So here he is, all sewn up. Remember when you stuff a lion that they're very powerful. They have strong muscles and they need to be able to stand and pounce. Now this little guy is very square here because of the knitting pattern. I'm going to give you a quick idea about how to round that out, and then we'll do the tail. Then we'll work on the mane. Remember, very important is the strength of this part of the legs right here, so he's not wobbly. You don't want a floppy lion. Lions are strong and fierce and not floppy. So rounding out the rear end here. I have another threaded piece of yarn, a bit too long, but there we go. I'm going to make sure I hide the tail, and I'm going to sew this so that it's more rounded. So I'm going to sew stitches from here to there, back to here and there, kind of like taking a dart. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. I seldom do it with the children, but I really like the roundedness of the rear end rather than the squareness. Square works for a lamb, but I think rounded for a lion. So I'm pushing that knot in. Whoops, not big enough. So I'm going to push it in again and take a little lock stitch right here, I think, to make sure it stays. Pop it in. We'll tuck that little end in afterwards. Here comes a lock stitch just to make sure that it will stay where I want it to. Oh, there we go. Not working out today. So here we go again. Nice thing about yarn is it is very forgiving. You can do these things over and over again. Here's my lock stitch. And that should lock it and keep it nice and still. And I'll tuck this end in afterwards, or I'll tuck him in as we go. So I'm starting here. I'm going to press in with my finger, that finger there, and I'm going to go back and forth. So these lines, the knitting lines, will guide me. I'm just going to pull it in from side to side. It's like taking a dart or a pleat. And or it's like a nip and a tuck in plastic surgery, I suppose, cosmetic surgery. See how I'm doing this back and forth stitch here? It's kind of like a ladder stitch or a mattress stitch. When I get up to about here, I'm going to pull those closed and we'll see if it makes the shape I want it to. And if not, I can go over it again and change it up. So now I'm going to pull these stitches closed, and you see how they pull up together like that? And I'm going to round the top of this lion here, and then I might do a little bit more rounding after that. Couple more stitches. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's rounder, but I would like it more round. So I'm going to go back down again with increasingly wider tucks. So if you see this is much wider, it's going to tuck it in more. And you can just kind of play around with this depending how your own particular lion is, but I quite like this tip. There we go, that's a lot more round, I think. Again, I made many, many lions before I came across this idea. And when I'm done, let's see how he looks from the side. That pleases me a little better. It could be more round, so the legs would stick out more. And there is a tip that I gave, let's see where that is now, but there's a tip about putting a thread going this way and then to the chest, which would pull the back together and make the legs stick out more if that's what you choose to do. But for now, I'm just going to finish it right here with a lock stitch. There's the lock, here's the key, locking it up. I'm going to tidy this up by just hiding it in somewhere like that. And I'm going to pull it slightly, clip it off, and it will disappear, never to be seen again. There we go. Now we're going to do the tail. So for the tail, some people finger crochet or something like that. I like a twisted tail. So I'm going to use 2 or 3 strands of yarn like this, which are about, oh, I don't know, 8 inches long, I think. Could be longer for the bigger lion, but for this one, it's this size. I'm going to thread the needle with all 3 or 2 pieces, 2 or 3 pieces of yarn are in the eye of the needle. And I'm going to take that through roughly where the tail is going to go. Let's say there. And once it's through, I'm going to take the needle out. So now I have strands of yarn kind of hanging out the back. It's not going to stay like that. This is longer than we need for this little guy, but still. And I'm going to twist these. I'm going to twist one in one direction and one in the other. So my right hand is going away from me, left hand towards me. Now, or I can just hold it in one place like this and twist with one hand. Whoops, if I let go, I've got to pick it up. Twist again as tightly as I can. And really the tighter the better. And you have to hold it at the ends, otherwise what's outside the space between your fingers won't get twisted. You see on this side it's not as tightly twisted as here, so all I have to do is go back and forth a little bit and it will even it out. Easier said than done with one lion and 2 hands, but there we go. And you want it to start twisting back on itself like that. When it's adequately twisted, and I might maybe want to do it a little bit more than that, but for now we'll just even it out. I'll make a knot, so this is clearly going to be way too long, but it's better too long than too short. This is an overhand knot, and I'm going to let go now, and it becomes a nicely twisted tail. So this is where you can decide to make it shorter. You can make it shorter, you can't make it longer, right? So I'm going to decide that the tail should be about that long. I'm going to put another knot there. I'm going to do it loosely, so then I know that, yeah, that's about where I want it to be. Tighten it up and clip it off just below the knot, like that. Make sure the knot is nice and tight. That's it. So there's the tail. Yes, I should have twisted it a little tighter and it wouldn't be doing that at the moment. It would be quite snug there. So anyway, there's his tail. Now comes the mane. There are two ways to do the mane. I'm going to show you the way that most people like to do, even though it is more laborious and more tedious. They take pieces of yarn, and again, for this little guy, short pieces, I think, but for a regular size, bulky weight, you want pieces that are about 8 to 10 inches long. And you'll take 2 of those strands, you'll fold them in half, like this. So that's half. And now I put the crochet hook in, or you could use any kind of hook, or children can use their fingers if they choose. And I'm going to look for about 3 rows just in front of the shoulders, 3 rows of knitting. So 1 row here, there's the second row, there's the third row. I should say 3 ridges, not 3 rows. So I'm going to do about 3 rows all the way around like this. I'm just going to do a couple for the sake of time. I'm going to put the hook in, a big hook, little stitches. I'm going to put the bent half, the folded half, the center of these strands through. Oops, slipped off again. And pull it through like this. And now I'm going to pull the ends through the loop like that. And I'm going to put these on all the way around. Now, if you're using yarn that is plied like this, you're able to do a really nice fluffed up mane. So if it's plied like this, you'll see it's plied means twisted together. So if you untwist it, you'll see that there are multiple strands here that I can pull apart like this. There we go, like that. And this is what you want to do to fluff up the mane. So go methodically all the way around, untwist from the top like this, otherwise it gets into a big tangle. So untwist from here at the top, and then pull these strands apart from down below. You can see it's quite tedious and time consuming, but it does look really nice in the end. Let me show you a larger line where I've done that. And I really like to do 3 rows all the way around from the shoulders to the chin and up again. Let me show you a larger line to see how it looks. This is what I've done with this lion here. Oh, so big he doesn't fit on the camera. Let me lift the camera up a little bit. There we go. Can you see that? Kind of, sort of. There we go. And I've gone all the way around with this applied yarn again, yarn that's been twisted around itself. And then I've untwisted it. And then I gave him a haircut by catching the mane there and clip, 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 clip. And again, you can always cut more off. You can't cut less off. So this is how he looks with a fluffed up mane. And I think very many people like that. And see his tail and his rounded rear end, I think look pretty good. I'm also going to use him as an example, if you don't mind, Mr. Lion, to show you a different way, not a new way, a different way of making a mane that is quicker and kind of curlier, not so fluffy. And let's see if you like it. I'm going to pause it for now while I get things ready. So here we are again. And I've got a piece of yarn here, and we're going to do the same kind of thing. It would normally be 3 rounds all the way around, but obviously he's got a mane on already, so I'll show you right here how we're going to do this. And it's basically stitching. So the end, you could just kind of start with it being inside. You don't really need a knot, but you could put a knot if you want. So I'm going in, say, over here, and I'm going to come up here for my first stitch. And I'm just going to let that end go inside. Or it could stick out a bit, no reason why not. There we go. And now I'm going to do a series of big stitches and little stitches. So the big stitches, it's pretty handy to go around a finger like that. Go on to the next place over. The finger will give you the size of the big loop. And now I'm going to do a small loop, like a really small loop, just a little tiny stitch like that. And now I'm going to do another big loop over this finger here. So I'm going to put my needle in. And here comes the loop going over like this. You could use your thumb, you could use a pencil, or you could use whatever else you like to do. Now comes the little stitch. This is much faster, as you can tell, than untwisting the whole thing. but it does need, I think, better coverage so that it looks a little more bushy and curly. So here comes another big loop, then a little stay stitch, I believe we could call it, which is a small tight stitch, and that keeps the big loops in place and stops them from pulling on each other. So you can see, right, you can see how it could look here. You will need to do multiple rounds of that, 3, maybe even 4, and pretty densely together, and try to make them not look too even, right? So you might sometimes do a stitch kind of this way around just so that it lies a little differently. Right, and then comes your small stitch right here. And then when you finish this piece of yarn that's on the needle, you can just tuck the end inside the body somewhere, or you can let a little bit stick out and take another piece of yarn and go round and round. So there's 2 options, fluffy, as I call it, which is really kind of nice, or curly, which again is also really nice, whichever you choose. Sometimes a slightly contrasting color is good. Sometimes the same color is really nice. Well, I hope you enjoy your lion. Here's the big lion, and here's the half-finished little one right beside him or her. This is in bulky weight yarn on 10.5. This is fingering weight on, I think, size 3 needles. Just to show the difference, I kind of like doing the smaller things these days, and they're finer, they're harder. It's much easier for children or beginner knitters to use the bigger yarn because they can get their hands around it and their fingers in, and they can really feel, stuff it easily and feel it. Remember, this is the most important part so that he will stand. Or she. Well, I guess this has to be he with a mane. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy your lion.